begin with, I had a very interesting chat with somebody who you know from your early days in rugby, Toby Booth.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so Toby was one of my first lecturers at St Mary's, so I was a student there, and it was fascinating talking to him because I was scared of him then, and fast forward sort of a few years, and I was still scared of him, even though I was interviewing him from about 200 miles away. And I mentioned that we were possibly going to speak to you, and he told a story around. Were you playing for Dartford Grammar at the time? Is that right?
Yeah.
And
how
he spotted you in the conversations he had to have with your parents around you making a choice in terms of rugby or your academic career. Is that right?
Yeah, that was it. So yeah, way back in the beginning, basically when the whole academy programs were getting started, basically they were doing the rounds and scouting, and yeah, he ended up coming to my house and trying to pitch to my parents, and obviously they were very adamant about no education, what about studies? And so yeah, I think probably if you ask Toby, the only time he's been scared was coming to my house, trying to convince my parents to let me take up pro rugby instead of going to university first.
And it's such a difficult question to ask, really. But are there any? Would you have changed anything from the decision you made back then?
No, definitely not. I think I guess you can always reflect back and think, okay, now was that the right decision? I think with the way things have panned out now, I'd say 100% yes. I was able to kind of start the road to professional rugby, have a good career with it, but then also complete my studies as well. Probably took a bit longer than I'd planned, but I did eventually get my degree. So, you know, I guess if you were to ask my parents, right, what would they have wanted for me from that moment? It would have been, right, okay, for rugby to go well and for you to get your education, and I managed to get both.
And do you think the systems are now in place? So I work part-time with the academy at Chelsea, and I look at some of the education provision. I know, I mean, Tom talk a lot about these, not so much you need a dual career in football, but you know, we have a player at the moment, Fikayo Tomori, who is in the first team, but who's continuing to do an Open University degree. And I think the systems are now, well, there's more acceptance of running alongside your degree with playing professional sport than maybe they were so a few years back. Do you think that's fair to say?
I'd say, yeah. I mean, what I would say is I think it's taken more seriously now, I think, and it's more realized as an actual prospect. I think if I think, say, back to when I started now, obviously, so again, talking about this pitch, you know, the plan was actually to link up properly with St Mary's and to study alongside it. But, you know, I think then it was a bit more, right, the studies will come, let's get the rugby sorted first. I think now people kind of realize that there is a pathway to do both at the same time, to do them really well in a way that doesn't compromise one or the other. I think there's a lot more systems in place. I think as well, people are more flexible now, so you can balance it out. I think maybe there was a fear, especially maybe at the start, whereby could you do a full-time university degree and be a full-time rugby player at the same time? And that's probably what scared a lot of people off. Whereas now you can quite easily do both, because I think, you know, people are more flexible. And I think from a sporting perspective, definitely, I think people realize actually there is a lot of time on your hands when you're not training. Obviously, training does take up your whole life, but there is enough hours in the week and in the day to say, right, I can commit 2 to 3 hours to a bit of study here, a bit of study there. So you can actually balance the two quite well.
It was well publicised, wasn't it? Probably a couple of years back, where Saracens gave time for their players to develop outside of their playing career. Is to your knowledge, is that a model that is now sort of widespread within rugby, particularly at the top end?
I think it's growing. I mean, I couldn't say specifically for other clubs, but I know when I was at London Irish my last few years with Declan Kidney, he was very adamant that players had to have something going on away from the pitch. I mean, he actually made it a point of selection. He said, if you come to me and ask me why I'm not in the team, one of the first things I'm going to ask you is, what are you doing away from the game? You know, are you upskilling yourself? Are you picking up, whether it's education or just something else, an interest, a hobby? If you've not got something else going on away from rugby, that's going to be one of our first conversations. And, you know, I think, like I say, it's growing. Saracens maybe one of the first to really outwardly say we are massively looking after our players away from rugby. And I would like to think that there's a ripple effect now going through the rest of the Premiership clubs and rugby in general.
Yeah. Sorry, can I ask what your degree was in, Topsy?
It was in business.
Okay, so I guess that gave you a good understanding of potentially some of the skills that you would have needed post your career.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it was I know initially I wanted to do law. I think my mum was a lawyer as well, and I thought that was the pathway for me. But I think, you know, as you, I guess, figure things out for yourself, I thought business would be more appropriate. It was more the direction I wanted to go in, quite wide ranging as well, but would mean that I think with a view to post career, I had a few options to look at, and I think that was the choice for me.
Brilliant. And just sort of now, how the combination of those two, what would you say you learned during your career, sort of on pitch, that you've been able to take off into your professional life at the moment?
I'd say two of the biggest ones I'm thinking right here, and especially given current situation, is I think being able to adapt and being resilient as well. You know, rugby tests you day in, day out, whether it's training against your own teammates or playing at the weekend. You know, you're constantly battling, you're constantly fighting, constantly trying to outwit the opposition and things like that. And everybody's doing the same thing. So it is a question of having to continually change, continually grow, adapt to changing environments, changing oppositions, and the ability to deal with a lot of setbacks in that as well. Because, like I said, everybody's fighting the same battle. You all want to win the trophy at the end of the season. Yeah. And there's going to be disappointments along the way. And you've got another game coming up 7 days down the track. It could be 5 days. You've got another session coming up 2 days' time. So, you know, it's a continual balance of almost good day, bad day, good win, bad loss, win a trophy, lose a final, season's gone, having to reset. So the ability to deal with that and keep progressing, keep moving forwards, I think is huge. And that's definitely one of probably a few things that, you know, I think, like I say, talking about now, you know, I mean, I've been home for 9 weeks with no work going on. And I say that could be quite a weird and tough situation. You know, when is my work coming back? You know, I've got bills to pay and things like that. So being able to kind of have a clear thought process that, you know, ultimately there's so much you can control in this situation, but I think as long as you're taking care of that, you understand that at some point it will be all right, then, you know, these are the things that you learn. And I think rugby's been huge for that.
Brilliant. And do you have children, Topsy?
Yeah, I've got 2 young kids. They're 6 and 4.
How's the homeschooling been then?
It's been all right, actually. It's in the beginning, it was a bit apprehensive. It was like, right, how is this going to work? Because as it turns out, our 6-year-old is smarter than us. Like, he knows some stuff that I'm like, right, okay, you have to teach me. And his school has been brilliant in terms of setting up an online platform so that, you know, we can help him a bit more, and that's been good. My daughter starts school in September as well, so now we have the process of trying to get her ready. So it's definitely been interesting. It's kind of helped maybe that they are young enough that, you know, they're just happy to be home and getting on with things. So that's been quite good. But yeah, definitely another challenge to have to deal with, because, you know, you're always conscious of how things are impacting them. You know, they're not seeing their friends, they're not doing things as they're used to. But you know, I guess if anything, kids are probably more resilient than anyone. You know, they just get on with it and they're happy, and the sun's out, they're in the garden, they're at home with their mum and dad. So it's been okay.
Yeah, I guess they've got no reference point to be disappointed with life, have they? They've got no.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, they're like, okay, I'm not at school. You know, can we go outside and play football? Yeah, we can. Okay, you've got a bit of work to do first. Okay, yeah, no problem. Now we're going outside. Yeah, okay, good. I'm happy. Let's go.
Life is simple. So, but any future career aspirations as a primary teacher?
Not as it stands. No, I mean, like the last year, I've been working in a school environment coaching, and I've really enjoyed that. And obviously, one of the follow-up questions was, "Oh, do you think you might get into teaching?" I think at the moment, with what I've got going on, I'm quite happy with that balance. I wouldn't completely rule it out, but I think at the moment I'm happy coaching.
Brilliant. And just on that, and I guess combine the two, when you were in the game, who do you think what coaches or support staff or players did you learn the most from?
Oh, quite a few. You've mentioned one already, Toby Booth. I mean, I guess probably one of the biggest influences in terms of putting me on the pathway towards professional rugby through the academy and then towards being my head coach. I think in our most successful period at London Irish, he was a massive, massive part of that, and for me individually. So, I mean, he had a huge influence on my career. Brian Ashton was another one early on. When I first was kind of getting involved in the England setup, there was a junior national academy program where they basically took 12, 13 of us to Bath University for weeks here and there, and kind of just taught us the nitty gritty of the game, about skill development, about seeing things a bit differently. And I mean, he was probably one of the first coaches I worked with that was just so different to everybody else. He was always trying to think differently to how everybody else was doing things, and I think there was a definite rub off there in terms of just trying to have a different aspect to the game. And basically, it's not a one size fits all. This is rugby, and we spoke about adaptability earlier. Week in, week out, everything is changing, and if you're not keeping up and trying to be better and more inventive, you just get left behind very quickly. So those were two key ones, and probably the other one would be Brian Smith as well. I would say probably the period where I was in the England setup and involved, he was heavily involved in the build up to that in terms of his influence on London Irish, how he transformed the way we played, and for me in my position as a winger, how he basically gave us the freedom to more or less do what we wanted. And the results were there, the benefits were there, and ended up with me going on an England tour to New Zealand. So, he had a massive part to play as well.
So I'm just really interested. Sorry to interject, Michael. You mentioned sort of Brian Ashton not necessarily like doing things differently and maybe the sort of less traditional way. I know it's quite difficult now, but can you almost reflect on the time, like what it was like to be a player and somebody approaching you as an individual to maybe go about doing things in a different way? How did you take to that? Was it something that you really embraced, or were you a little bit reticent to start off with?
I would say at the time I embraced it, because again, when I think I would have been 18, 19 at the time.
Yeah.
So still very young, still very raw in a game that was a lot different to probably what it is now. So you're just probably a lot more open to new ideas, to new ways of thinking. I mean, I'm one that jumps out very clearly. I remember he said, sometimes you get sets where you're defending inside your 22 and, you repeat attacks, and all of a sudden you get a penalty and everyone kind of breathes a huge sigh of relief, right? We can clear our lines, we can take our time. And one of the things he always said, well, why does nobody ever think, right, they've just been attacking all that energy. They're probably not thinking that, why don't we just attack straight away and go when they're almost at their most vulnerable? Yeah. If there's space, tap it and go. Move the ball to space. Don't do what everybody expects you to do, which is, right, take a few seconds, kick to the line out, reset everything. There's opportunities like that in every facet of the game. And that one sticks out because that was probably one of the ones that was like, this whole, turning defense into attack. That is probably where the attack is at their most weakest, because they think they're about to score, and all of a sudden you flip things around on their head and it might create a whole load of opportunities.
Yeah. Sorry, I mean, we call it innovative thinking, but I guess it's thinking slightly differently. It really struck me, Topsy. We did a webinar with Leinster Rugby, who the university has a quite a close relationship with, and there's a guy at Leeds Beckett who's done some work on tactical periodisation, and again it just struck me around. So he was saying, even whether it's sort of semi-professional first team, the reluctance to engage in contact on a Tuesday if I played Saturday is still there, and actually saying physiologically and from a physical loading perspective, there's no reason why we don't train like that. And it just struck me as from a coaching perspective, how we still look through, almost, there's a sense of security that we have to replicate what others are doing, rather than thinking differently. So it's just struck me when you said there about that how think we get sucked into specific ways of thinking rather than trying to, at the best of times, be open about how we approach the games that we're involved with.
Yeah, I get that absolutely, and you know, I've even especially now where I've maybe had more of an eye on coaching it is, you know, how do you change that style of thinking? You know, how do you get away from things that are so set in their ways? And you know, if I reflect on it, I guess one of the big things is pressure, especially in that elite environment. You know, if you try something different and it doesn't work and you lose, immediately you're like, right, okay, we need to go back to what we know and what we trust and what we have confidence with. And maybe it takes time that maybe you're not afforded at that elite level to really say, right, no, this is how we're going to do it. We're going to stick with this, whether it works or doesn't. In the end, we hope that it will come good. Some teams get there in the end, and you know, they maybe afford themselves a bit more time, and you know, maybe they have the squad and the collective mindset to do it that way as well. I think that's a massive help. You know, guys that are open to that kind of free thinking and doing things differently, and understanding that okay, it might not work, but we're not going to lose faith in it just because there's a few bumps in the road.
Yeah. In your current coaching role, and you coach in a variety of settings, but how would you describe yourself, do you think?
Oh, that's a good one. I think ultimately, I had this in my head pre-retire. I always found myself as a coach who just really wanted to develop players and help them improve. I think the area of coaching that I enjoy most is kind of that individual contact, that one-on-one, that kind of helping players discover something. I guess the balance for me is obviously, I know having had a career, a lot of people were like, you know, they want the answers. They want you to tell them like, oh, how should I do this? How should I do that? What did you do? And I guess, okay, that's all well and good in terms of experience, but my situations were unique to me. What was happening there in my environment, yours is completely different. So, okay, it's good for you to maybe hear my story, but ultimately you have to figure out the answers and those decisions for yourself so that they're relevant to you. So, I mean, I'd say I'm a laid back coach. I think I like to, you know, be quite positive and to, you know, almost inspire players to kind of go on that journey, but also to be quite approachable as well. You know, I haven't maybe not scarred enough yet to be kind of the harsh, shouty coach and getting stuck into people. I mean, that's never really been in my nature. I think I like to do things quite differently.
And I'm going to ask a question now that one may not make sense, or two may not even be a question. So stay with me on this one. I'm just thinking about. No, sorry, that's never a good statement to start a question with. If you, I look, until probably 6 years ago, before I started doing some work with Leinster, my knowledge of rugby was that I would watch it and that was it, and wasn't aware, I don't think, of the intricacies of the game, which I'm completely aware of now. But looking back, even like over the last 3 years, kicking has become a fundamental part of the game now. Yeah, whether it's kicking for in terms of percentages, or kicking for space, or kicking as a pass, I guess. So that's been, I'm saying innovation, that's been a development in the game. So I think my two questions are, what do you think will be the next development in the game? And what would you have to develop as a coach to ensure that development you successfully apply it to the game, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I'm with you. Okay. Again, so I'm probably the same, you know, especially doing a lot of work in the media now, commentary. I'm kind of trying to use my eye to see almost what's going on away from the ball. You know, how, like you say, those kind of intricate details that maybe when you're watching it live, you don't pick up because it's actually happening away from the main bit of the action. I don't know. I'd say I can see there being a big shift towards more ball in play time. I think that's something that everybody is quite keen to increase, basically. Less stoppages, less slowing of the game down. You know, it looks like maybe we're on a path towards more summer rugby, which hopefully will be faster. So I think if an increase in game time, quicker scrums, quicker line outs, less dead time, I think that's going to be something big. And it actually, for the game itself as an advert, say, it might even make it a bit more exciting. So I mean,
Yeah.
again, almost similar to what we were talking about with Brian Ashton. You know, I think in preparing teams, they're just going to need to be really adaptable to everything that's going on at the moment. So understanding that almost unless there is an injury and the referee said play is stopped, there is always an opportunity and always a vulnerability on either side of the ball.
Yeah.
And if you switch off for a second, one of those free thinking players, open thinking players, is thinking every single second, how can I exploit what's happening in front of me? And it's the one guy who maybe there's a penalty, he turns his back, like we're talking about kick pass. Referee, can I go? Yep, he's kicked it 50 meters. You've not even noticed, and they scored in the corner. You're like, right, okay, that's just happened. I think, yeah, more running rugby. I think maybe more risk averse rugby. Is that the right way?
Yeah.
In terms of, I think players more willing to take risks, regardless of what the outcome might be, but understanding that those risks are actually part of the journey towards being a more dangerous and more threatening player and team. That's the shift I'd like to see anyway.
It almost sounds like you and again, apologies if I keep on apologising this morning, but like you would have been really suited to that game you're describing.
Yeah, well, I think maybe I was at the start of it in terms of, like I say, when Brian Smith came, and it was, you know, especially with the back three, myself, Dylan Armitage, Silosi Tangitakimbao, we had free license to basically go and hunt the ball down and create things and to cause havoc. And to the rest of the team, it was just crack on. Like, if something happens that's not in terms of what we've actually planned structure-wise, it doesn't matter. We will just roll with it. And eventually the structure might come back, but we want to be as unpredictable and as threatening across the pitch as possible. You know, I laugh about it now with, you know, some of the guys, some of the forwards especially. They were like, oh, we used to love it because, you know, we could hang out in the wide channels. You know, we weren't just crash ball up the middle. You know, we could be in the wide channels working with you guys. And then if we saw you in the middle of the pitch, we said, like, right, well, hopefully you'll beat the first player. The second player might tackle you. So we'll pick up an offload and then we'll get a try. So it was, it was nice to kind of have that freedom to basically have your own game plan within a bigger game plan. And I think I enjoyed it.
It always fascinates me, and maybe the comparison is not fair, but the links between American football and rugby, and just something you said there really resonated with me. And I think so. My American football team is Miami Dolphins, and they've been having a terrible time. But they came up with a play from like 30 years back, where actually there was some rugby type passes. So the quarterback got it, and I think it ended up being thrown by the wide receiver for a try to be scored, and they split their defence left and right field. It was a really sort of unorthodox play, but I think that's what's fascinated me about rugby. And you alluded to it there, where you said the forwards were hanging out in wide areas around. It's always fascinated me why rugby hasn't developed more. I'm going to say general players, but players that can play in more multiple positions. Obviously, there are certain physical characteristics needed for those positions, but I don't know. Again, if this is answerable, but wonder why there hasn't been that much fluidity in the game, so to speak, where actually you have got a forward picking the ball up and behaving like a back and so on.
I'd say again, it's tradition, that kind of risk element as well. Not wanting to go against what's natural. Well, I say natural in terms of, right, you know, you're a hooker, you're a forward, your job is to do this. I don't think there's enough coaching and maybe openness to coaching that way, and to kind of saying to players, actually, you are allowed to express yourself differently. You know, just because you're a forward, you know, you're built like a forward, doesn't mean that you can't have the skill set, the thought process, and even, you know, from a physical attribute point of view, build the speed and the agility to move and play like a back. Sorry. You know, you look at someone like Shark Brits, for example. Like, you know, he was a hooker, but he could be a centre. He could have been a winger. And there are players of that ilk in the game now, but there's probably not enough of them, or not enough that think that way.
Yeah.
To kind of think that, right, and maybe that they're coached that way in terms of, right, this is my position, this is my skill set for that position, and that's my priority, fine. But then they don't allow themselves, and maybe their coaching doesn't allow them to think about different skills that actually could add more weapons to their arsenal. You know, the ability to, throw a 20-meter miss pass off your left hand, to offload in those wide channels, to be able to, rather than, well, I'm big, so I'm only going to run straight. Can I actually beat someone with a footwork, create a soft shoulder, and offload it when every other time I've carried, two guys are just going to double team me? You know, that sort of thinking. And again, you know, I thinking about the elite level, I think it does come down to the pressure, and it's results driven. The resilience to say, okay, it's not worked. Do we bin it or do we carry on with it? And ultimately, the grand prize is winning the title at the end of the season. And you know, maybe just in that realm, there's not enough scope, especially when you're like a first team player. You're in action every single week. It is literally, what do I need to do this week to prepare myself to win at the weekend? And I understand that, having been in it, you know, your focus is winning at the weekend. So how much time can you allow yourself on developing the alternative thinking side of your game?
Yeah. It's again, just something you said there. We often speak to our students about, I don't know if you remember the PS4 advert where there's the fleas in the jar. And I don't know if this is true or not, but for me, it's always works as a good analogy. They pour fleas into a jar, they screw the lid on, so the fleas can only jump to the height of the lid, and then they take the lid off, but then the fleas and their offspring still continue to only jump to the height of the lid, because that's what they've been constrained to think and behave like. So we often talk about to our students about not being the lid on players' development or abilities to think differently on the pitch. So I wonder how much we as coaches and even as players always put the lid on other people, if that makes sense, and restrict their sort of I guess non-linear type thinking.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I think so. You know, it's a thought process, isn't it? It's allowing yourself to aspire to more than you're doing at the moment, and to be like, that's okay, I'm going to work on it. I might not be able to do it now, but right, my next goal is, as a personal challenge, is to be able to do a different skill, something that I know I'm not good at, but I want to be good at it because it will make me a better player.
Yeah.
Topsy, when you, sorry, Michael, again, I'm just interested in, you know, you described, you know, the time where you were empowered to have a bit more freedom on the pitch, and you know, certainly had that creativity yourself. What did that look like? How did that manifest itself on the training pitch? What did it look like in relation to, you know, going from a process where maybe you were more structured to less structured in certain moments?
It was fun. It was chaotic to begin with, to be honest, because you know, you're not expecting it, and you know, rugby is heavily structured in most phases of the game. So all of a sudden, if something happens that is unexpected, a lot of reaction is, well, no, hang on, you can't do that because, you know, we've called this and we're set up to do this. And then you'd be like, well, I've seen an opportunity, as I've been given that freedom to, and gone for it. So is that not better than going through with, oh, we've called this, we have to do it? Ultimately, we're looking for positive, better outcomes. Yeah. So obviously, outcome A on your side is, right, okay, we've called it, we've run it, we've made a meter or so, fine. Outcome B, I've seen an opportunity, done something, made 5-10 meters, the opposition's now on the back foot. Which scenario is better? So I think we definitely, there was a process whereby we had to coach everyone, as we're saying, to just be a bit more reactive, a bit more adaptable. And with time, you get used to it as well, because you look around the players and the team that you have, and most will, you talk about your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities. And we knew one of our strengths was that, you know, we weren't the biggest team, we could handle ourselves physically, but we were quick, we were fast, we were agile, and we were creative. So we said we'd be foolish to not utilize our strengths. And given that we were previously, you know, we were down near the bottom of the leagues. You know, nobody really saw us as a threat, especially Brian Smith coming over from Australia. He said, well, why not try something different? You know, most teams don't expect much of you at the moment, so let's give them something to think about. And you know, again, slowly but surely, teams started to take notice and realize that, okay, actually these guys are doing something really different, something really threatening. They're not the old London Irish, whereby I remember when we first started, we had a huge emphasis on kicking. You know, we were a kicking team. We backed our forwards to maybe just give us a bit of parity and kick our goals 3, 6, 9. We didn't score many tries, didn't have many threatening players. Whereas now, we were almost trying to develop a bit more of an all-court game, and because we didn't have a reputation really to, you know, to base anything off, it was kind of refreshing, and it was quite open, and it was quite new.
And when you were like playing the game, you obviously were in a position where you yourself were trying to identify these opportunities where you could do something slightly different, where, you know, you might be able to see these opportunities as they like appear in front of you. Can you just sort of talk through, and it's probably quite hard because it's retrospective, but just almost like the decision-making processes that you took, how you would identify those moments, and then also, I suppose, how you like progressively improved in that, because there must have been times where you got it wrong and you reflected on it, and, you know, how did that process, you know, materialize over time? I'm just really intrigued.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely got it wrong sometimes. Geez, I remember one again. Talk about, you know, experience is obviously a huge thing. I remember one time trying a chip kick inside my 22, it getting charged down, and they scored, and I got hauled off at half time. Yeah, again, you're like, right, okay, I'll never ever do that again. But, you know, I think it was more of a case of you're free to make these decisions, but there are consequences. Of course, luckily we won that game by 50, so it didn't have a huge bearing. It is a tough one. I mean, experience of having practiced it, knowing when is the right time and when it's not, but also a feel for in games. I mean, my big one was feeling, and in terms of how the game was going, sometimes it wouldn't always be clear opportunities. Sometimes it might be, for me, it was right, I've not been involved enough. I just need to get involved and start helping my team. And, you know, I would pop up at first receiver a lot. You know, you talk about struck, you know, a lot of teams will set their 3 pods of forwards straight into the brick wall. Well, what if a back pops up there all of a sudden? You're playing on double teaming a forward. Actually, now you've got someone quick and agile in front of you. And that was actually a situation I quite loved. And it wouldn't necessarily always lead to a line break. So you're talking about feel and stuff like that, but it might just be, right, here's an opportunity to put the defense on the back foot for 2 meters, to give our team some momentum so that we can get a bit more into the game. And, you know, talk about, you know, again, you learn the strengths of your team. And myself, obviously Dylan, Silossi, we actually, our relationship, we would almost work in tandem or in a trio. So say I would carry once, Silossi would carry the very next time. So you'd almost get that double or triple pronged effect, and then Dylan would pop up as well. So you start getting a real understanding of your team's strengths, not just individually, but as a unit. So, you know, that was something we did quite often. You know, one of us would carry, the other one would carry straight away. We would just try and stay in sync and try and use our unit to really help the team. And like I said, that's a feel thing as well. You know, sometimes I might pop up and 3 guys will smash him, and you go, okay, fine, fair enough, you read that. But the next time, when they've done it 2 or 3 times, and say, if I'm carrying, then the other winger's carrying, there's only so many times you can maybe effectively stop that before one of us makes a break. And that it only takes 1 break to change the game. So that was, like I say, it was a feeling thing, an experience thing. Guess homework as well, understanding your opposition, you know, looking at people in game. I guess on the wing, you probably have a bit more time to see what's really going on. You're not as involved in the chaos.
Yeah.
Almost picking on people as well. They're like, oh, he's just made 2 tackles. He looks a bit tired. Let's pick on him again and see if he can back it up.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you think the creativity that you were afforded was maybe like correlated to the number of tries that you personally, you know, you scored? Did you see the 2 things being in tandem, or?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think, you know, again, we always had this running joke about one of us would have a purple patch where the other one was assisting, and then it would flip around. And again, you feed off each other, and there's healthy competition in that. Oh, actually, I don't want to get left behind, but you understand. As long as we're all scoring, then it's fine. But as wingers, especially, you're like, hang on, I need to be top of the charts as well. So it's a healthy battle, but it helps us both. It helps us both influence the team in a positive manner.
Topsy, just talking about your playing career, what was sort of some of the key milestones and achievements during that period of time for you as a professional?
I'd say my first team debut, definitely. That was, again, that's in the initial concept of the academy and everything. The goal was to make the first team and become an established first team player.
Right.
So your debut is kind of the first step, and it was a huge moment. Home game, scored with my first touch. Obviously, complete elation. You're like, wow, okay, right, this is it. Didn't play the next week, so I was like, okay, this is it. But again, that moment kind of sets you on your pathway. I think the next one, from a club perspective, probably the one that stands out. There was a few, but the one that stands out was our Heineken Cup semi-final in 2008, which was basically what propelled me onto the England tour. It's kind of one of those. I think people do say it, but when you're in the zone and you're hot and everything is working and it's just give me the ball and let me work. And we didn't even win the game, but I think afterwards there was. I mean, I wasn't quite aware of it until maybe a few days after. But I even remember Brian Smith saying to me afterwards that you've done something special today, and did a lot of press and things, media afterwards. And again, from there, I think a week or two later, I was getting a phone call saying that I was going on the England tour to New Zealand. So that kind of period there was very huge. And then if I pick one more, I guess I would say it happened twice. I was about to say breaking the record for most appearances. So I kind of broke it, got injured, someone else overtook me, I got fit again, and then re-broke it.
Right.
So yeah, something that quite rare to do it twice in such a short period. But again, it was something that was never ever on the radar until all of a sudden it was actually you're 20 games away, you're 10 games away. And thinking back now, reflecting on it, it's a part of history, something that will hopefully stand for a very, very long time. One of those things that, wins and losses and all that, something that nobody can ever take away from me. Yeah. Because, now I think on it, it was a proud moment.
In those moments that you sort of described, it's just really interested in, like, and you mentioned resilience earlier, just almost what you did with your emotions. So, like, you take the first one you talked about your first appearance. You've gone from this really like joyous moment. You must have felt elation to then not being picked the next week. How did you deal with those, like, such big, like, swings in emotions, and ultimately, like, what did you do with those?
Yeah, it's tough. Because, like I say, it's such a weird thing. You work very hard to get your opportunity. It goes unbelievably well, and you think, right, okay, I'm going to be in. At least I'm going to be playing the next week. And then I got a phone call on Tuesday. Selection goes out, and right, he's like, "Oh, you're not going to be involved this week." And you're like, impossible. Like, how?
Yeah.
And so obviously, here we go. So I was on my way to a lecture at the time.
Right.
So obviously, right, things are good. You're in a good mood for the week, and then you get this phone call, and it's like, I remember I didn't go to the lecture.
Right.
I said, right, I'm going home.
Yeah.
I just said, you literally just completely burst my bubble. I said, how? I don't get it. You think things are based on the form and everything. But maybe, I've never asked him, never spoken to him. Maybe he had a plan in terms of how he wanted to develop his young players and not give them too much.
Yeah.
But for me, it was right. Okay, I had an angry period. We had a day off the next day as well. So again, enough time to kind of stew. And then by Thursday's training, I think we spoke on the Thursday. I can't remember what we said, but I remember speaking because I know I still had a bit of
Yeah.
anger about it. But then it was like, right, okay, Thursday's normally your last big day for a Saturday game before you get the team ready. So it was a question of, right, okay, let's help the guys get ready, park what I'm doing for the meantime anyway.
Yeah.
But I think another week or two, I was back involved, and then I can't remember from then the next period that I spent out of the team.
Right. So it's almost helped you deal with that. I suppose, like, do you, across those that sort of period of 24, 48 hours, I'm just really intrigued, like how ultimately, like how you were feeling. I know it must be really difficult because, you know, it's a long time ago to think about being in that moment, but is there anybody that you sort of relied on to have those have conversations with that helped you through that period?
Yeah, my housemates. Remember, I was in an academy house at the time with 2 other boys, and so you're all kind of in a similar boat.
Yeah.
So they kind of impart that elation, like, you know, the weekend went well, brilliant. I should be playing next week. Yeah. And then you get the phone call, and you're like, I've been dropped. And obviously, they're on your side. They're like, I can't believe you've been dropped. You know, you played well, you scored. Like, you know, everybody was happy, raving about the performance.
Yeah.
So you almost automatically assume that the next one's coming straight away.
Yeah.
So, and I guess as a young player, it's good that, you know, maybe part of the system of you all living together is you can kind of all help each other along the way, dealing with similar emotions and things, and kind of the roller coaster of playing one week, not playing, being in the team, being out of the team.
Yeah.
But yeah, my housemates played a big part in terms of, you know, the kind of, maybe you share it as well. So that we were all happy.
Yeah.
One of us had kind of made that jump. Then we were all angry, but then it's like, okay, now we've all got to go training, kind of improve to see if one of us can get another shot.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of that, but I think that, yeah, my housemates were a huge help.
And then I suppose in both the other two that you described, just the lead up to both, you know, going away with England, and then also, you know, like you say, 10 games, 20 games out from breaking the caps record. Like the lead up to that, those moments must have been, you know, really difficult to deal with from a, like, maybe like some anxiety, some nervousness, excitement, etc. Like how did that period go for you? Like how did you feel through that period? And
yeah, very different. I mean, so the England tour, a lot of people say, "Oh, were you nervous?" And that. I mean, honestly, it was pure excitement.
Yeah.
You know, especially going to New Zealand. I've you know, watched rugby for a number of years. The All Blacks, kind of the team on the pedestal.
Yeah.
To have the opportunity to go down there and to play, I was just so excited. You know, and even remember it was a night game as well, so obviously you have all day to possibly build up different emotions and things like that. But I just remember the whole time, like in my room, like, you know, just obviously everyone says, you know, try and stay calm, treat it as a normal day. There's a lot of build up to these night games. You're up all day waiting for kickoff at 7:45 in the evening, I think it was. But again, having maybe not expected to be on the tour,
Yeah.
and then getting the call up, and then, right, okay, I'm in the squad. Will I play? I mean, there's other internationals here, and then the team gets named and you're in it, and it's like, right, okay, wow, all right, this is going to happen. And even I remember again, so on the pitch facing the haka again, something you've seen and watched on the TV numerous times, and it's 20 meters in front of your face, and I remember like your Dan Carter's there, Mills Muliaina's there, and you're like, what's like, wow, this is awesome. This is right, okay. And even like, so, you know, we got hammered in the game, but again, I scored 2, held my own, and just again, it was even afterwards, it was like, okay, that was good. I enjoyed that.
Yeah.
That was really good. And then fast forward to the record, you know, it was something that you try not to think about, because, you know, again, maybe if you start thinking too far ahead, you know, anything could have happened. I could have been dropped. I could have got injured. The closer you get, you start thinking about it a bit more. So I tried my best not to. But obviously, when everyone around you is mentioning it, it becomes subconsciously, consciously, you do think about it and thinking, right, okay, let's get this done. Let's get it knocked off, and then everybody can relax, and then we can almost carry on as normal. So again, it was, I mean, I guess one thing that I was, if I think back now, conscious of, it would have been really nice for my family and for my kids especially to kind of run out with me for that moment. Those photos are everywhere now. And again, if I think of career highlights, I've got a nice picture, myself, my son, my daughter in the middle of the pitch, team running out behind us, crowd and everything. And again, that's 10, 20 years. I mean, my son knows more about my rugby career and everything. He was there for a couple of years of it, but 10, 20 years time, we're looking at this picture. It's like, oh, you guys came out on the pitch with me. That was when Daddy broke the record for most appearances ever for the club. And obviously, when you get milestones, you're allowed to share it with your family. So that's something quite rare.
During that time, when was it that you first gave thought to what you might do after rugby?
I'd say probably around the time I was hitting 29, 30. I'd made a conscious effort that I was going to get my degree, and then I think I finished that. So I ended up doing it Open University and finishing around the time I was about 27, 28. And then I guess another year or two after, it was like, right, okay, what's the plan? And then my dad would always say, what's your exit strategy? Rugby's not going to be around forever. Everyone talks about hitting 30 and then, right, things getting a bit more real. So what's your plan? What are you going to do? And that's kind of when I actively started trying to map out, okay, what areas do I enjoy? What do I want to get into? What do I need to do that? I knew coaching was one of the first ones. When you were in sports, everyone was like, oh, would you coach? And I knew I always enjoyed it. I mean, you coach a lot as part of your community obligations anyway. But aside from that, I knew I enjoyed it. So I think that first year, I started doing some work with our junior academy. So coming on a Monday night, just getting a feel for it, working some with the 15, 16, 17-year-olds, and kind of just mentoring them as well and getting that process started, and then built that up to then coaching and having a more hands-on role with men's teams.
And then what does the current day look like? What are the roles that you're involved with at the moment if we fast forward a few years?
Yeah, so fast forward. So Monday to Thursday, I coach at St. John's School in Leatherhead.
Yeah.
So I'm there all year. So first time I do rugby, and now I've been doing football, and I would have been doing athletics this summer term as well. So again, talking about a new chapter, new adventure. I really wanted to explore the school system and to kind of figure out which coaching environment suited me best, suited my family as well. That was a big thing. So that's been quite good to get involved in that. Then Tuesday, Thursday nights, I do my men's coaching team in the national leagues. I have a role, an ambassador role with London Irish, helping with the new stadium move. That's kind of more events based. So as and when events pop up, if I need to be at a game or I need to be here, I do that. And then I commentate and do punditry as well for the weekends. So it's a balancing act. But again, luckily, it all fits quite well. Nothing really has overlapped, which is, I'm amazed, because you think it gets to the weekend, and I always joke, I said, right, a weekend I could be in any one of 4 places. I could be at a school game, I could be at an Irish game, I could be commentating, or I could be at my men's coaching team's game as well. So I was like, right, how exactly is that going to work? But again, a lot of people understanding, I guess, the way the calendar fell as well. It all seemed to work out.
When things like that fall in place, it's meant to be, isn't it, Topsy? I think when it all aligns, I think all of those opportunities are meant to be. Where do you think? I'm always, there's that cliche, isn't it? What would if you writing a letter to your 15-year-old self or something like that? Do you mind me asking how old you are now? Sorry.
34.
34. Okay. If you were to write a letter to your 40-year-old self, what would you be doing, do you think? 6 years time.
6 years time. I think I'd be doing what I'm doing now, I think. but I'd be more heavily involved into it.
Okay.
I think I've enjoyed it that much, and like you said, it's fallen into place that well that I want more of it.
Yeah.
So I guess I'd say, yeah, keep kind of working hard at the opportunities you've now created, and don't let them go, because as things are at the moment, you're doing something that you really enjoy, which is a privilege and which is lucky. It suits your family as well. So I have enough time to work hard, but also enough time to spend at home with my kids and with my family. And you're involved in areas. Like I always said, one thing that I wanted to really give back, especially to rugby, has given me so much in terms of coaching, in terms of being involved. And I'm able to do that both on and off the pitch as well. So again, I think a greater involvement, that's what I'd want.
And do you see a future? Would you? And this is such a. Yeah, I'm fully in charge of the silly questions today, so apologies, Topsy.
Go for it.
No. Do you think that if an opportunity in the professional game came up, that that would be something you would look to work towards?
Yeah, I think so. I think I would definitely explore it. Whether I would jump at it, I don't know, because again, talking about learning experience, I knew one thing, maybe because my kids were a bit younger, I understood that I was away a lot. You're away training in the week, you're away for away games, European trips, and you've got a long time. So I knew that I wanted more control of my schedule, which I would be giving up as a professional coach. But again, I'm in a different place now. Kids are a bit older, they're more grown up. So I would definitely be open to looking at getting back into the professional game.
These last 2 months have definitely been payback. Young children getting greater access to their to their families.
Yeah, definitely.
I think we'll need a holiday after this, Topsy.
Where are we flying to?
That's my plan. A remote island with nobody, with people like Tom and the rest of my family bothering me. So.
It's all right. Everyone will be open in another month's time. So
yeah. Fingers crossed. I've only got 4 weeks to wait. I'm really conscious of the time and coming towards the hour, and it's weird, isn't it? Like when you work in sport, that there's an acceptance that Saturday, Sunday, bank holiday, weekends is just another day, another working day. So, which, as I'm sure you're out of it now, isn't always the case. But thank you for giving up your time to chat with us today. It's going to be great working with you in the future.
Yeah, no worries. I've enjoyed it. It's been good.
Good stuff.
Really appreciate your time. I thought it was a fascinating insight. So, yeah, thank you for your time, mate. Really appreciate it.